Welcome to Heartbreaker, your love radio. It was a gray autumn afternoon, the fallen leaves painting the path to the front door with shades of ochre and red. The sound of the doorbell cut through the air, a clear and insistent note that reverberated against the walls of the house. Isabella, with a strange feeling in her stomach, walked to the door and slowly opened it. There he was, Nathan, standing under the threshold like a vision from a distant and painful past. He wore a worn coat and held a small leather suitcase, his eyes fixed on Isabella, laden with unfathomable emotion. "I buried you. I thought you were gone forever," Isabella murmured, her hands trembling slightly as she held the door. The shock of seeing him there, so tangible, was disconcerting. Nathan took a hesitant step forward, his piercing gaze trying to decipher the emotions crossing Isabella's face. "I needed to see you," he said, his voice low and hoarse from the time that had passed. "There's so much I need to explain." Isabella stepped back slightly, her heart pounding. "How is it possible you were?" The word dead got stuck in her throat, daring not to be spoken. I know what you thought," Nathan interrupted, noticing her hesitation. But I have been far away, very far. And now, I have returned." The silence between them stretched for a moment, heavy with the load of unasked questions and possibly painful answers. Finally breaking the silence, Isabella invited him inside, her mind spinning with the implications of this unexpected return. Nathan, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of many winters, crossed the threshold, bringing with him the ghosts of the past. Nathan followed Isabella into the living room, where the fireplace was still unlit, leaving the room a bit colder than usual. The soft light entering through the windows cast long shadows over the furniture, creating a gloomy atmosphere that reflected Isabella's state of mind. She turned to him, her arms crossed, a physical barrier against the confusion that Nathan brought with him. "I was convinced you were dead. Where have you been all this time?" she asked, her voice carrying a mix of anger and despair. Nathan looked around, as if searching for the right words among the familiar objects that surrounded him. He hesitated before answering, the weight of each word measured in his tired expression. "It's better that you don't know. The things I had to do, the places I've been, they wouldn't bring you peace." Isabella felt a stab of frustration. "Don't come at me with riddles, Nathan. I deserve to know. I had to rebuild my life thinking I had lost you forever." Nathan lowered his gaze, clearly struggling with the decision of how deeply he could dive into the details of his absence. "I was under protection. There were people after me, and I couldn't risk involving you in that. Everything I did was to protect you, to protect Meg." Isabella let out a trembling sigh, trying to assimilate the information. "And all this time, you didn't think to give us at least a sign of life? Do you know how hard it was?" I know it was selfish," Nathan admitted, his face somber. "But sometimes, keeping distance is the only way to ensure the safety of those we love. I don't expect you to understand or forgive, just know that every day away from you was also a torture for me." Isabella shook her head, the reality of the situation beginning to settle in. "You talk as if we still had a chance," she said, a thread of sadness in her voice. But things have changed, Nathan. They changed while you were protecting us from afar." Nathan took a step towards her, a plea evident in his eyes. "I know a lot has changed. But I had to see you, had to try to explain, even if it's too late." Isabella looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears she refused to shed. Maybe it is too late," she murmured, her voice almost a whisper. Nathan reached out as if to touch her arm but hesitated, leaving the gesture incomplete. The distance between them, once measured in miles, now seemed insurmountable. The atmosphere in the living room was thick with tension between Isabella and Nathan when the sound of keys turning in the lock echoed down the hallway. The moment was abruptly interrupted, as if reality had just been waiting for this cue to reintroduce the mundane into that scene loaded with the past. Paul entered the house, carrying a smile and a bouquet of vibrant flowers. Look, the birthday boy is here, and even brought flowers for his beauty." His cheerful voice suddenly died when his eyes met the figure of Nathan, a man he knew only from photographs and Isabella's painful accounts. Paul's smile faded, replaced by an expression of confusion and surprise. What's going on here?" Isabella? He asked, his gaze shifting between Isabella and Nathan, seeking some explanation for the presence of this ghost from the past in his living room. Isabella, realizing how delicate the situation had become, tried to introduce some normality. Paul, this is Nathan, he's come back. Her voice faltered, the complexity of her emotions making it hard to maintain composure. Hold on. Weren't you supposed to be gone? Paul articulated the words slowly, as if each syllable could help reorganize his thoughts. What do you mean come back? Isabella, you said he was dead. Nathan, realizing the seriousness of the misunderstanding, intervened. Paul, I understand this is a shock. I never intended to disrupt your lives like this. There was a lot I needed to resolve before I could return. Paul looked from Isabella to Nathan, a mix of emotions crossing his face. So, where exactly have you been all this time? And why choose today, my birthday, to make this dramatic return? Nathan began to respond, but was interrupted by Isabella, who felt the need to protect both Paul and their daughter from the full truth. Paul, can we talk about this later? Now is not the time. However, Paul, though shaken, insisted. No, I think I deserve to know now. Why is he here, Isabella? His voice, though controlled, carried a hint of hurt. Nathan stepped forward, speaking not just to Paul but to everyone present. I didn't plan for things to happen this way. But the truth is, I never stopped thinking about my family, even while I was away. The air in the room seemed to vibrate with the tension of unspoken words and questions needing answers. Isabella, realizing that the situation could escalate further, suggested calmly, let's all sit down and try to resolve this in a civilized manner. Paul, please. Paul, visibly shaken, nodded slowly, the flowers forgotten in his hand. All right, let's talk. The room was set up for a celebration, with colorful balloons floating on the ceiling and a table carefully prepared with snacks and drinks. However, the festive atmosphere now seemed like a farce, a fragile mask that barely concealed the complexity and pain of the current situation. Isabella sat on the sofa, her hands clasped in her lap, while Paul and Nathan chose opposite chairs, facing each other as if in a silent standoff. The air was heavy, each breath seeming weighted with the burden of uncertainty and the unknown. Paul, trying to maintain his composure, began the conversation. Nathan, I understand that the circumstances of your departure and now your return are complicated. But you need to understand that your presence here affects all of us, not just Isabella. Nathan nodded, his expression grave. I know that, and I deeply regret it. It was not my intention to cause more pain. Isabella intervened, her voice firm despite the evident emotional tremor. Nathan, what we need to know is why now? Why, after all these years without a single sign of life, did you decide to show up today? Nathan looked at her, his eyes filled with remorse. I only recently managed to free myself from the threats that kept me away. I couldn't return earlier without putting you all at risk. And I didn't choose today because it's Paul's birthday, it was just when I managed to arrive. Paul took a deep breath, trying to absorb Nathan's words. And what about us? How do you think Isabella and Meg dealt with your death? How do you think we built a life together, thinking you would never return? Nathan lowered his head, clearly affected by the implicit accusations in Paul's questions. I never wanted you to suffer. If there had been any other way. Isabella, feeling the space between them widen with each word, added, but there was a way, Nathan. We moved on. It wasn't easy, and just when we started to make some sense of things again, everything is thrown into the air. Paul, looking directly at Nathan, spoke with cutting clarity. You say you came back because the threats have disappeared. But what about the threats to our balance now? To our home? Have you thought about how your return would affect Meg? Nathan looked up, determination mixed with evident pain in his voice. I thought about all of that. Every day. But I also couldn't stop thinking that maybe there was a chance to repair some of the damage, to explain. Explaining doesn't change the past, Nathan. It doesn't change the years of pain and uncertainty, Isabella interrupted, her voice trembling but resolute. The silence that followed was heavy and charged. Nathan, Paul, and Isabella were caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, the past irreversibly intertwined with the present, each one struggling to find a path through the tangle of pain, forgiveness, and responsibility. Finally, Paul broke the silence. I think we need time to process this. Not just today, but in the days to come. Isabella agreed, her words coming out slowly. Yes, time. Perhaps that's all we can ask for right now. They were all united in this grim understanding, each facing the reality that Nathan's return had triggered. The daylight began to fade, tinting the sky a deep blue while shadows lengthened across the room. The tension was palpable, each character lost in their own thoughts, facing the repercussions of Nathan's unexpected return. Paul, with his arms crossed, broke the silence that had settled after the discussion. His tone was more controlled, but irritation was still perceptible. Nathan, you talk about repairing damage, but you seem not to realize that your mere presence here is already causing havoc. How do you expect us to deal with this? Nathan, sitting across from him, looked older and worn from the journey he had faced. Paul, I understand your frustration and accept that my return is difficult for everyone. I just thought that maybe we could find a way to coexist for the sake of Meg. Isabella, sitting between the two, felt like a judge in a courtroom, weighing each word that was spoken. A coexistence isn't so simple, Nathan. You disappeared. Paul was here. He's the one who helped heal the wounds your departure left. Paul nodded, acknowledging Isabella's support. Exactly. And now, on my birthday, all this comes to the fore. Can you imagine the impact? Nathan ran his hands through his hair, clearly distressed. I didn't choose this day to ruin anything. Circumstances brought me back now. But I understand, and if my presence here is so disturbing, I can leave. I don't want to cause more pain. Isabella looked at Nathan, then at Paul, and felt a wave of sadness for both. It's not about leaving or staying, Nathan. It's about understanding that we can't just go back in time. There are wounds here that weren't caused by you, but were definitely exacerbated by your absence. Paul relaxed a bit, his gaze shifting between Isabella and Nathan. What Isabella is trying to say is that we need time to understand all this. It's not just about deciding if you stay or go. It's about how we rebuild from here. Nathan nodded slowly, looking at Isabella with a mix of gratitude and pain. I expected too much, perhaps. I hoped to find things as I left them, but life doesn't wait. And no, it doesn't wait, Isabella agreed, a tear slipping involuntarily. We have to deal with things as they are, not as we would wish them to be. There was a moment of shared silence, a tacit acknowledgement of the difficult path they all would have to navigate together. Paul finally spoke, his voice soft but firm. Well, my day is over after this. You have to go now, Nathan, Isabella and I need to talk. Nathan offered a sad smile, agreeing. You're right, Paul. And, again, I'm sorry for everything. 2 days after Nathan's tumultuous return, Isabella found herself driving to the couple's old retreat, a small park by the edge of a tranquil lake, surrounded by tall pines. It was a place where, in the past, they had shared moments of serenity and silent promises. Now, the calm waters and the soft murmur of the trees seemed to resonate with the memories of a less complicated time. Isabella was sitting on a wooden bench, absent-mindedly looking at the shimmering surface of the lake, when she heard footsteps approaching. Raising her eyes, she saw Nathan walking towards her, his face marked by a mix of surprise and nostalgia. I never imagined you would still visit our place, Nathan said, his voice low and filled with emotion. Isabella gave a faint smile, more sad than happy. I don't come here often. Not since I received the news of your death. Nathan sat down beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. I understand. It must have been hard for you to come here, knowing what happened. Isabella sighed, turning to face him. Hard is an understatement. This place was our refuge, Nathan. And when you died, it just became another reminder of what we lost. Nathan looked at his hands, clearly struggling with his words. I'm so sorry, Isabella. For everything. For not being here, for making you go through this alone. Isabella shook her head, a tear sliding down her cheek. Do you think it was easy to rebuild my life? How quickly I replaced you. Her voice trembled with the intensity of her emotions. Nathan turned to her, his gaze intense. I know it wasn't easy. None of it was. If I could have done it any other way. But you didn't, Nathan. You chose to stay away, you chose to let me think you were dead. Isabella interrupted, her frustration evident. There was a long silence, the sound of the wind in the trees filling the space between them. Finally, Nathan spoke again, his voice soft, but firm. I was trying to protect you and Meg. I didn't want to, but it was the only way to ensure that you were both safe. I don't expect you to forgive me, just hope that you can understand. Isabella looked at the lake, reflecting on Nathan's words. I try to understand, Nathan, I really do. But it's hard. This whole situation is difficult. Nathan nodded, accepting her words. I know. And I'm here now, willing to do whatever it takes to fix things. To help heal the wounds I've caused. Isabella looked at him, the weight of future decisions hanging over her shoulders. I don't know what that means yet, Nathan. The two remained seated together, the sun beginning to set behind the pines, casting long shadows over the lake. Night had fallen by the time Isabella and Nathan returned to the house. The stars began to dot the sky, but the atmosphere inside the house was palpably dark, much darker than the night outside could suggest. Upon entering, they were greeted by a scene of escalating tension. Paul was in the center of the room, with a gasoline bottle in one hand and a lighter in the other, his face illuminated by the uncertain glow of the lamp above. Meg sat on the sofa, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. Well, you know, we need to dot the I's and cross the T's, as they say, Paul murmured, slightly shaking the bottle, clearly intoxicated. Isabella rushed to him, fear clear in her voice. Paul, what are you doing? We can talk about this. It doesn't need to come to this point. Paul laughed, a sound that held no humor. You chose him, Isabella. I know. He gestured with the bottle towards Nathan, who maintained a safe distance. Nathan intervened, his voice calm, trying to cut through the tension. Paul, let's put this down and talk. No one needs to get hurt here. Paul shook his head, disbelieving. Why postpone? Let's settle this now. There's nothing to discuss in the morning. Isabella positioned herself between Paul and Nathan, her hands raised in a gesture of appeasement. Paul, please think about Meg. She doesn't need to see this. Meg, hearing her name, stood up. You know, I want to stay with Daddy, she said, her loyalty to Nathan clear and firm. Nathan looked at his daughter, pain evident in his eyes. Meg, now is not the time. We'll sort this out and we'll talk later. Meg, crying, looked at Isabella. You've ruined everything, Mom. Isabella, her voice laden with emotion, responded, Meg, go to your room now. We need to resolve this, and I don't want you to get hurt. Paul, shaking his head and laughing bitterly, said, Look at this, now he's making me out to be a psychopath in front of my own family. Why? What have I done to deserve this? Isabella tried again, her voice pleading. Paul, you are a good, noble man. You helped me overcome the tragedy and took care of me and Meg. Anger won't solve anything. Please don't do anything rash. Paul, tears beginning to form in his eyes, looked at her. Do you really think I would do that? He has always been a barrier between us. Even in memory, he was a shadow in our relationship. I've always been the second choice, but I never complained. Isabella, approaching cautiously, placed her hand on Paul's shoulder. Paul, you don't need to leave because of this. With a sob, Paul's emotion overflowed. I know I can't compete. I'm just here to say goodbye. I'll grab some things, fill up with gasoline, and isolate myself in my cabin in the forest. Please step back. Isabella, with tears streaming down her face, whispered softly, All right. I'll leave now. Paul then lowered the bottle and, turning to Nathan, said, Take good care of them. The room was silent after Paul's departure, only the occasional sound of the house settling breaking the silence. The air was heavy, saturated with the aftermath of the emotions that had erupted moments earlier. Nathan and Isabella remained where they were, each processing the gravity of what had just happened. Nathan was the first to break the silence, his voice laden with remorse. Isabella, I never wanted things to reach this point. I just wanted to come back home to you and to Meg. Isabella, still shaken, looked at him with a mix of relief and resentment. And Nathan, your home has changed while you were away. It's not the place you left. And Paul, he didn't deserve this. Nathan nodded, painfully aware of his actions. I know. And I take responsibility for that. But now that I'm here, I want to do whatever it takes to repair what was broken, if you'll let me. Isabella sighed, feeling the weight of his words. It's not that simple, Nathan. Things can't just go back to the way they were. Paul was more than a replacement, he was a partner, a father to Meg when she needed one most. Nathan lowered his head, accepting the truth in Isabella's words. I understand. And I'm not asking to replace him or erase what he meant to you both. I'm just asking for a chance to be part of your lives again, in whatever way you decide. The tension between them began to ebb, replaced by a tenuous truce, still fragile and uncertain. Isabella looked at Nathan, her eyes exploring the face she had loved and lost. It will take time, Nathan. A lot of time. And I can't promise anything more than that. Nathan nodded, his expression serious. A time is all I'm asking for, Isabella. There was a pause, both contemplating the difficult path ahead. Finally, Isabella spoke again, her voice firmer. And now, we need to take care of Meg. She's confused and scared, and we need to be strong for her. We need to show her that, no matter what happens, she is our priority. Nathan agreed, relief visible on his features. You're right. Let's do that. Let's make sure Meg knows that we are both here for her, no matter what happens. Isabella and Nathan went up the stairs together. Nathan and Isabella had managed to calm Meg, who now slept in her room, her peaceful face hiding the turbulent emotions of the day. In the kitchen, Nathan and Isabella sat facing each other, each with a steaming cup of tea, a small gesture of normality in a world that seemed to have been turned upside down. The clock on the wall marked the passing of time, each tick a reminder of what was still to come. Isabella broke the silence, her voice soft but laden with exhaustion. Nathan, today was more than I could have imagined. I don't know how we'll get through this. Nathan nodded, his eyes meeting hers. I know, Isabella. I've brought so many complications into your life since my return. But I'm here now, and I'm committed to doing things right, not just for you and Meg, but also for Paul. Isabella smiled sadly. Paul? I don't know how we're going to fix things with him. He's hurt, and rightly so. His life, our life, was turned upside down in an instant. Nathan set his cup down on the table, his gaze serious. I will give Paul all the space and respect he needs. What I did tonight, it was never my intention. I just hope that, in time, he can see that I didn't mean to cause any harm. A time heals many things, Nathan. I hope it can heal this too, Isabella responded, running her hand through her hair, a look of fatigue on her face. Nathan reached across the table, offering a gesture of support. Isabella accepted, their hands intertwining for a moment. We will rebuild, Isabella. Together. It won't be easy, and there will be times when we doubt everything, but I am here. And I am with you. Isabella looked at their clasped hands, a symbol of unity and joint confrontation. And Meg, she needs us now more than ever. We need to be a fortress for her, showing her that, no matter what happens, she has a family that loves her unconditionally. Nathan agreed, a firm nod. She will always have that. I promise, Isabella. No matter what happens, I will never leave you again. The two remained seated, sharing the silence, each lost in their thoughts about the future. It was an uncertain path, but one they would now walk together, strengthened by the promise to do whatever was necessary to heal the wounds of the past and build a new future for their family.